I thought it was nearly Resi at the. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the executive meeting. Apologies for being a couple of minutes behind time. It was just to make sure that all of the public speakers were given every opportunity to get here through Zoom for those that are doing so. To welcome everybody to the meeting, whether you're a member of the committee are here in person or are watching along at home. Before we go on to item 1, declarations of interest, just like to record apologies from Councillor Paula Widdowson and everybody else that is expected is here today. Item 1, declarations of interest. If I could ask colleagues if they had any additional declarations to declare. Councillor Cuthbertson.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the record, I would like to say regarding item 9 that I have no pecuniary or personal interest in this item, but members and residents should be aware that I'm one of the elected local councillors for Haxby and Wigginton Ward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I can't see any other additional declarations. That then takes us through to agenda item 2, which is to consider the exclusion of the press and the public. And this is to consider that during consideration of annexes A, B and C to agenda item 9, which is Haxby Station, on the grounds that they contain information relating to the financial or business affairs of particular persons and therefore is classified as such under the Local Government Act 1972. I'll just look for nods or indications from colleagues that they're happy at that stage. So I can see that a clear consensus in favour of excluding the press and the public. And should we discuss those annexes on agenda item 9? Obviously, we tend to attempt to avoid discussing the annexes so that we can remain in public for the whole item. But if we do, we will exclude the press and the public when we get to that stage. Agenda item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting, which are set out on pages 3 to 14 that have been published. And again, I'll just give a couple of seconds in case any colleagues wanted to raise any issues from the minutes. If not, again, if I could ask for indications that we're happy to accept the minutes from the previous meeting. Thank you very much. So again, could see a clear consensus or hands that we're happy to accept the minutes from the previous meeting. That takes us straight on to agenda item 4, which is public participation. Pleased to say that we have 9 public speakers today, some of whom are dialing in and others are here in person. 2 public speakers who were registered have subsequently dropped out, which has meant that all 9 that are here are able to speak. So without further ado, our first public speaker is Councillor Webb, who's registered on agenda item 6 regarding holiday hunger. And Councillor Webb, you'll have 3 minutes when you get to the table and turn the microphone on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to talk to you on item 6, the preparations for welfare winter planning and support. And given the weather today, you might have left winter planning a little late. But let me begin by saying any money for vulnerable children is welcome, and I am focusing on that aspect of that item. And I'm glad that the authority has recognised that this in better time this year. But at the same time, it is absolutely critical to highlight that this funding will not cover all who need it, and will be down to the wonderful people of York to support their neighbours above and beyond the call yet again. I hope that the executive members here tonight truly recognise the concerns this opposition Labour group have highlighted around how children are being let down in this city. A good example of this being the very difficult situation children's services find themselves in right now. The main issue that I have to highlight this evening are the concerns that Liberal Democrat and Green councillors are cozying up to Tory policy. Specifically, I refer to relying on the holiday activity and food programme to attempt to feed children at Christmas this year. This scheme put forward by the Tories is aiming to do a couple of things. 1, get Marcus Rashford off their backs, and 2, and far more sinisterly, separating children and families into deserving and undeserving poor. For example, child A can get out to an activity, and therefore, by completing a game of football in the snow in December, they get a sandwich. Child B can't get out because they're looking after younger family members. They go hungry, not even the cold sandwich. By relying on this, we're not doing all that can be done. By your own figures, there are 3,347 children eligible for free school meals. According to figures collected by the National Education Union, there are 6,787 children living in poverty in the York area. Not all of these kids are going to go to an arts and crafts club aimed for 8-year-olds. And in that week of Christmas, what other activities are going to be available? It's going to be hard. The Liberal Democrats and Greens are playing the Tory game of dividing up people into different groups based on their outdated views. So, Executive, please don't make the vulnerable children of this city have to sing for their suppers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Webb, including sticking perfectly to the time limit, which is appreciated, and we'll consider your comments when we get to and discuss agenda item 6. Our second public speaker today is Tom Franklin, who is registered to speak on agenda item 8, the York Outer Ring Road, and Tom is joining us via Zoom, so hopefully you can hear me and you have the 3 minutes to talk to the executive on that item. Tom.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to speak on the topic of dualling the Ring Road. I'm speaking as chair of York Green Party. There is a climate emergency, as the council acknowledged in a near unanimous vote in 2019. Since then, as the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, has shown, things are even worse than we understood them to be then. Action to achieve net carbon zero is more urgent, and there is less time to achieve it. The City of York Council has pledged for the city, not just the council, to be carbon neutral by 2030. If we are to achieve that, then we need to be reducing the major causes of emissions in the city. Transport is the largest emitting sector in the region at 31%. There is no way we can achieve our carbon targets unless we dramatically reduce the volume of petrol and diesel vehicles on the roads and the embodied carbon in the road construction and extra vehicles that will use the road. The City Council should not be doing anything that will increase traffic, but we know from virtually every single road scheme, if you build a road or widen a road, you increase traffic on it and on the surrounding roads, which will include more traffic coming into the city centre. For that reason, we simply must not dual the Ring Road. The report is woefully adequate when it comes to carbon emissions associated with the Ring Road. It does not discuss the emissions required in building the road, but it will be far more than the 28,000 tonnes that York Community Wood would sequester. And then there are increased emissions from induced demand, which are not mentioned either. Norfolk County Council has just pulled their road developments because the plan did not include sufficient decarbonisation information. You should follow that lead and withdraw these plans until you are provided with full details of the carbon emissions related to construction and induced demand. I would love to be able to stop here because as councillors, you appreciate the vital importance of reducing the city carbon emissions and reject the proposal before you. However, all parties on the council, other than the Greens, have supported dualling the Ring Road for decades, and it will therefore probably go ahead. Whilst we acknowledge that as a result of the consultation, improvements to provision for active travel have been made to the design of the Ring Road, there are still areas where further work is needed for the safety of pedestrians and cyclists. The provision for active transport need to be linked into a longer-term strategy with the Local Transport Plan 4 to create a coherent network of high-quality routes suitable for anyone. Most importantly, if the Ring Road is to be widened, then we must ensure that it is used to genuinely divert traffic away from the city centre. The report mentions the Smarter Transport Evolution Programme
If you
and
could draw your comments to a close, please.
Yeah, nearly there. And increasing the modal share of active transport, but includes no details of how these relate to the ring road or any numbers on how these will be achieved. If the ring road does go through to planning application, it will need at the very least to demonstrate how dualling the ring road would genuinely support the council's objectives of becoming carbon neutral. So unless you can demonstrate that the dualling the ring road will reduce carbon emissions, then for the sake of the city and future generations who live here, I hope you will reject this unnecessary and damaging scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will take into account your comments when we consider agenda item 8. Our third public speaker today is Ben Story, who has also registered to speak on agenda item 8, York Outer Ring Road, and is joining us virtually. Ben, you have 3 minutes to speak to us.
Thank you very much. As the park manager, I'm representing the owner of the Web Adventure Park and Little Bugs Childcare, who is currently not in the country. As a management team, we're extremely concerned about the safety of the guests and our team members, especially those who do not drive. Those walking, cycling, or using public transport will be at greater risk with this road development. We have over 200,000 visitors a year and 60 employees. Many of those employees are under the age of 18 years and often walk or cycle to the park. A few have experienced near misses trying to cross the road by bike as they island hop due to there being no cycle link directly to the north of the junction. This is also no controlled crossing provided on the north leg of the junction. One is necessary to allow safe access to the park from the bus stop and from Clifton Moor. There are a high proportion of parents using the bus stop with pushchairs and toddlers. This is extremely dangerous now. We are aware that the riding school has the same problem and have suggested a dual crossing. Parents will struggle to cross the road and will attempt to push prams down the grass verge on the west. They also cross Wigginton Road to get to Stirling Road, as it is the shortest route. They are unlikely to search for the controlled crossings as it is much further and it will be particularly unattractive in bad weather. A paved path is to be provided past Breck's Nook, but is very narrow for families with pushchairs or disabled users and leaves very little room for passing someone going in the opposite direction. This verge is presently used as a path and cyclists going south often use it as well. We are totally unable to take our nursery children out of the park at present. The new scheme will not improve this situation. Noise mitigation is a real issue. The noise from traffic is really bad and there is significant hedging and tree cover. We have an animal park which will totally be exposed to the dual carriageway once the hedge has been removed. Not only will this be distressing for the animals, but also a significant safety issue. This stretch of road is fast now and will only get worse with the new design. The speed limit is too high, is frequently ignored, and the area at our entrance and the bus stop is unlit. We have witnessed a few car accidents coming into our park due to the speed that cars leave the roundabout as they see the straight road and do not reduce their speed. We need speed control off the dual carriageway and preferably a lit right turn provision. Finally, we ask that you consider how we will be able to operate during the construction phase. As a business badly impacted by the pandemic, we are concerned that this will further affect us, possibly for a long period of time. This is the opportunity to prevent accidents in the future, and this is why I ask you to put safety before cost. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, which we'll consider when we get to agenda item 8. Our fourth public speaker today is Councillor Melly, who's also dialing into the meeting and is registered to speak on agenda item 8, the York Outer Ring Road, and you have 3 minutes to talk to us.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm speaking on the agenda item about York Outer Ring Road dualling. And it's interesting to see that the administration have now dropped the pretense that the scheme was for Outer Ring Road upgrades, because it's clear from the report that while the plans do include dualling the carriageway, the scheme overall cannot reasonably be described as improvements or as much of an upgrade. The Outer Ring Road is important. for two reasons. It's a key transport route for people who live near it, and it's an arterial road around our city that plays an important part in the transport network for the whole city. But your current plans won't make good enough improvements for either purpose. For people living in the vicinity of the ring road, a large proportion of all journeys involve some sort of interaction with the ring road, either along it or across it. For local journeys, everyone should have the option of walking or cycling. Nobody should be forced to use a car because the council fails to provide safe walking and cycling infrastructure. The consultation responses are pretty damning on this. 86% said the current ring road conditions are poor for cyclists, and 78% said conditions are poor for pedestrians. So clearly improvements are needed, but less than half of respondents felt the plans will successfully improve active travel. The cycle path plans are inadequate. They don't even meet LTN 120 minimum standards. The plans also include hugely diverting 3 pedestrian public rights of way, meaning that instead of direct walking routes, people have to walk a long diversion along a noisy, polluted dual carriageway. The scheme will lead to more traffic, more vehicles, faster speeds, and a physically wider road. It will be more difficult to cross, which is why it's almost universally agreed that accessible underpasses or bridges are needed, as shown at several roundabouts on the ring road. Why then are crossings proposed at the Wigginton Road roundabout? This is a compromise, but one that isn't good enough for anyone on foot, cycle, or car. Vehicles will have to stop at traffic lights to allow people to cross, which is the opposite of helping to keep traffic moving. And it doesn't include a crossing just north of the roundabout for people accessing local businesses there by bus, bike, or walking. There's a nursery and kids play centre there. You've already heard from other public speakers about the negative impacts of the scheme on local businesses and local people who'd like to access them. The scheme is being looked at in isolation. It isn't part of a citywide transport plan and doesn't include any sort of strategy for actually reducing congestion. Modelling shows that without a strategy, the ring road will quickly fill up and be just as congested as it currently is. Why spend all this money and cause so much inconvenience to residents who drive on the ring road if it won't improve traffic flow, reduce congestion, or make journeys quicker? Why isn't the scheme part of a wider strategy for the city's transport network? Where is the wider plan for diverting traffic and freeing up road space in residential areas? Dualling the ring road could be beneficial for York if done properly, easing congestion and reducing air pollution. But these plans are inadequate in every measure. They don't meet the government prescribed minimums for cycle and pedestrian path designs. They don't comply with the council's own transport hierarchy. They contradict the council's commitment to creating a carbon neutral city. They don't include a plan to actually reduce congestion, either on the ring road or elsewhere in the city. You need to review these plans and change them. Otherwise, your scheme will be a huge wasted opportunity and a waste of money.
Could start drawing your comments to a close, please. I will take that as you'd finished your comments. So thank you very much for speaking to us, and we'll take those into account when we consider agenda item 8 later in the meeting. Our 5th public speaker today is Hughie Ferguson, also registered to speak on agenda item 8, York Outer Ring Road, and who is dialing into the meeting. You have 3 minutes to speak to us.
Thank you, evening, ladies and gents. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm really concerned again about the upgrading of the A1237, especially the lack of safety features, as we've already heard, on the Wigginton Road, Haxby Road, stretch and roundabout. The first issue I have with this is around the survey, and it's 3,262 respondents. That's actually under 10% of the affected population of Haxby, Wigginton, Clifton Without, New Eastwick, Huntington and Rawcliffe. Surely this survey should have gone to more people who are actually going to be affected. The next issue I have is around question 16 and how strongly, question 16 asks about how strongly do you agree or disagree with our plans? Will they help improve provision for cyclists? Surely this question is too open, as provision at one end, such as Strensall, with the inclusion of a new underpass, may be seen as good, but if you come over to Wigginton Road, nothing has changed. So that question for me just doesn't make sense, and it is too far open. As I've stated in my previous executive meeting that I spoke at, safety of different road users is paramount, especially when traffic is going to be so dense and going at such a speed. I was down there earlier this week and I was really scared to actually island hop between Clifton Moor and the Wigginton Road roundabout. Later on in your meeting, you're going to be asked to endorse the York and North Yorkshire Road Safety Partnership to ensure effective delivery of road safety measures and initiatives across the city. The current plans for Wigginton Road do not meet this. And also now need to ask, why does Haxby need a second underpass? Why does Clifton Moor need an underpass that goes into a current empty field that has been set aside for housing? That surely just looks more attractive to people who are housing developers. But yet Wigginton Road, with its current local businesses that are meant for use by families with small children, is being ignored. There's been 16 incidents, including one serious incident on the approach to the Wigginton Road roundabout. I, for one, am not going to risk my family island hopping when the road is dualled, not at 60 miles an hour. And then to add on further insult, I have to island hop over a road that's going 60 miles an hour just to be then pushed onto a grass verge to access the Webb Adventure Park. It's not good enough. This again comes back to what you've been asked to support earlier or later on tonight. I would also say that between Haxby and Wigginton roundabouts, we've seen 8 accidents. If one of these accidents would have come onto the very nice pavement and cycle track that's already been built there, we may have actually seen a fatality of a pedestrian or cyclist. We need to have proper safety measures along the road.
If you could draw your comments to a close, please.
Yes, will do. A 1 metre grass verge is not good enough. It only takes one jackknife lorry to come into the pathway and we will have a serious accident. Finalisation, the upgrade on the A1237 has a massive effect overall, as you will see in your item agenda for the Haxby station as well. Please consider everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll take into account your comments when we consider the agenda item. Our 6th public speaker today is Mark Corrigan, who is registered to speak on the York Outer Ring Road on behalf of the British Horse Society. And you have 3 minutes to talk to us.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Mark Corrigan. I'm employed by the British Horse Society as an access field officer for Yorkshire, an equestrian charity which represents the 3 million horse riders in the UK. Currently, 2 horses per week are killed on our roads. Whilst we have had sight of early plans, we have not been provided with copies. We welcome any controlled crossings as suggested that would facilitate safer crossings for horse riders. We are concerned that the B1363 approach to the Wigginton roundabout does not have a controlled crossing, and we seek to have a Pegasus crossing included in the plan at this location. Having had the benefit of visiting this site, it appears that NMU users are being disadvantaged here by having no safe way of crossing this road, which will undoubtedly become even busier when this scheme has been completed. Whilst at this location, road crossing waiting times for a gap in the traffic, timed by myself, varied between 2 and 7 minutes. Keeping a horse waiting for such a time at this location could result in a horse becoming anxious, which could be extremely dangerous. And we consider that a controlled crossing here would facilitate the safety of walkers, cyclists and horse riders when crossing here. The YO postcode area has 641 passport registered horses. Beta estimate the cost of keeping a horse to be £4,225 a year, which represents a significant contribution of £2,708,225 to the local economy. That risks being lost permanently if links and safety are compromised and people are forced to move their horses to other localities that have safer riding. Links to communities along with linking to existing bridleways and byways must be included in this scheme. The York Riding School, which will be affected by this dual carriageway project, must be given due consideration. The scheme encompasses part of the land currently owned by the riding school to create part of the scheme. This business will be affected with a loss of grazing for the riding school ponies. Alternative grazing is available across the already busy 1363, and these ponies must have safe access to the grazing land. It is imperative that a Pegasus crossing is provided here to ensure a safe crossing and the continued viability of the riding school. The B1363 is already congested, with roadside furniture impairing the sightlines for pedestrians. This road becomes even more difficult to cross when riding or leading a pony. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much for your comments that we'll take into account when we consider the agenda item. We're now moving on to our seventh speaker and back to speakers in the room. Our seventh speaker is Lorna Marchie, who's registered on agenda item 8, York Outer Ring Road. And again, once you've had an opportunity to get to the table and turn your microphone on, your 3 minutes will start.
Good evening. I'm going to speak to you specifically about item 8, the York Ring Road, but Wigginton Road. Wigginton Road Junction is my interest. I'm a stakeholder and affected landowner in this scheme, and I represent the residents and the businesses to the north of Wigginton Road Junction. I expect that you will be minded to recommend this planning submission, as there is huge pressure to build this road. However, I hope to convince you that this application is not yet ready. It needs modification and it will not stand scrutiny. There are 10 comments from respondents specifically mentioning the York Riding School. There is no controlled crossing for the school's horses, and though it is stated to be on the table, it's not on the plan, so it's not there. We have suggested an inexpensive dual-purpose toucan crossing for horses and the users of the bus stop. Changes to the arrangements for pedestrians and cyclists have been made to the south and to the east of the junction. However, there are no safe crossing places or cycle paths to the north, a road designated at 40 miles an hour, but presently negotiable at 50 if there is no northbound queue. Families with prams and toddlers will still island hop, as they will take the fastest route from Creepy Crawlers to Stirling Road. The solitary proposed footpath is so narrow as to be dangerous and will still be used by southbound cyclists who are trying to avoid the traffic at the junction. There needs to be better provision for pedestrians and cyclists to the north of the junction. All our access points are to remain as are, and the right turn lane at Southgate is to be widened. However, the turning calculation is not relevant to big lorries which enter daily for Waddington flooring. The calculations need to be redone and to ensure that large vehicles will not overrun the refuge island and the crossing point. We have only just discovered that there is to be no noise mitigation at this junction. The houses, the riding school's remaining land, and that of the adventure park will be exposed completely to the new carriageway, making it impossible to safely carry out normal activities. Noise mitigation at this location is essential for both homes and for businesses. Finally, officers will claim that modifications are still on the table, but this is only the case for very minor changes. After this plan has been submitted, there is very little or even no room for further change. There are clear grounds for us to challenge this application as statutory objectors. Alternatively, you could insist on vital amendments at this stage. What are the real costs of desirable safety features, sustainable transport options, and mitigation when weighed against the lengthy inquiry?
Draw your comments to a close, please.
Thank you, and I'm here to answer any questions on that agenda item.
Thank you very much for your comments and coming today, which is appreciated, and we'll take that into account when we consider agenda item 8. Our 8th public speaker today is Andy Shrimpton, who is also registered to speak on agenda item 8, the York Outer Ring Road, on behalf of the York Cycle Campaign. And again, your 3 minutes will start once you've pressed the microphone.
Members of the Executive, as a campaign, we remain neutral on the existence of the Outer Ring Road, but we'd like to highlight that all the evidence demonstrates that building this road will only bring short-term relief and ultimately lead to more cars and more congestion. This much was admitted to me by a senior York transport officer in recent years. Nevertheless, officers do state that they anticipate this scheme will redistribute traffic around the city and reduce its impact within York's urban areas. However, anticipation alone will not be enough to spare us another generation of entrenched car dependency.
We believe that the increase in motor traffic, 25% in the last decade, is largely responsible for a massive drop of cycling in York in recent years. If cycling is to increase again, the motor traffic in York's urban areas must be reduced. If executive members decide to approve this scheme, then the Cycle Campaign proposes that they lock in its potential benefits by committing measures that will genuinely reduce cross-city car journeys and increase active travel. The Belgian city of Ghent, which shares many similarities with York, has led the way in this respect, introducing a very successful traffic circulation plan, which prevents cross-city journeys and redirects drivers around the ring road. The Cycle Campaign have invited Ghent's Deputy Mayor to talk about this plan, and this will be on the 24th of November at 7 p.m. And we warmly invite all the members of the executive and transport officers to attend. Regarding the design of the road itself, we welcome the improvements that will make it safer and easier for people travelling by cycle or on foot. However, there are some areas that need further work. Once the ring road is dual, it will become too dangerous for pedestrians and cyclists to cross it unsupported. And we ask that supported crossings or underpasses should be provided as a minimum at all ring road crossing points. In particular, we ask for improvements that are made on the following locations. As stated earlier, Wigginton Road roundabout, providing supported crossings or an underpass. Reconsider the layout of the walk cycle path at Shipton Road, which currently proposes badly angled underpass with hairpin bends. The design should accommodate the design vehicle as specified in LTM 120. Provision of walk cycle access on the new Clifton Moor estate, a supported crossing at Monk's Cross, and lighting to illuminate all the walk cycle paths, not just the road. It's not good enough to say the money has run out and that additional walk cycle improvements cannot be made now. York's transport hierarchy puts pedestrians and cyclists above motor vehicles. So therefore, safe, direct and accessible walk cycle routes must take priority over improvements for motorists. And we ask the executive request a feasibility study into adopting the Ghent model as a condition of approving this scheme. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments, which we'll take into account at the later agenda item. And then our ninth public speaker today is Councillor Doughty, who's registered to speak on agenda item 8, the York Outer Ring Road, and agenda item 9, Haxby Station. And as you'll know, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. CYC has a responsibility for the detail and delivery of the scheme, which will be judged by residents in the years ahead. These proposals are supposedly based on resident consultation, have taken a year for you to look at. You would think plenty of time for the relevant due diligence to have taken place. I was shocked when I heard from residents in properties closest to the Earswick-Strensel roundabout who shared communication to the executive with me, stating that they first heard of revised proposals was Monday the afternoon this week, just a couple of days ahead of you supposedly making decisions over the use of their land. One of the neighbours was told more of their front garden would be needed, at a point where they could no longer have an opportunity to give their views. I implore the council leader to write to these residents at the earliest opportunity to apologise for this gross oversight and to open up dialogue to address their concerns. In my first viewing of the current proposals last week, when I attended a presentation by an officer to Earswick Parish councillors, detail which CYC insisted on taking away afterwards, it became very clear aspects of what had been discussed over several years, including repeated conversations about the critical location of the cycle and pedestrian crossing at the roundabout has been dangerously close to the junction, has been completely ignored. Everyone I speak to, residents, both parish councils of Earswick and Strensel, believe the crossing proposal is an accident waiting to happen, with the potential for traffic to be coming off the ring road at speed directly into a location where cyclists and pedestrians will be forced to cross Strensel Road to and from the underpass. The crossing needs to be further along Strensel Road. Earswick Parish Council have made several requests for the new dualling sections to be more fairly placed between Earswick and Huntington, which would not only help protect more of Diamond Jubilee Wood, but the closest residents who are on the Earswick side, but were told this was not possible to the position of a water main on the south side. However, this is the same water main that exists between Monk's Cross and Little Hop Road, where the report now proposes to move the new road from the north to the south for environmental and habitat reasons. Why, therefore, is the same not being done in an equitable manner for Earswick residents? I was shocked when the officer confirmed last week there's been no modelling at the roundabout for access to and from Strensel. A resident was told by a council officer that traffic stopped by the crossing heading for Strensthal would queue in its own feeder lane and would therefore not impede traffic flow on the dual carriageway. What wasn't mentioned was traffic coming from Hopgrove or Monk's Cross direction would come round the roundabout and then have nowhere to go, so will be stationary on the roundabout. This will be the same case approaching from Huntington. Strensthal has a population of a market town similar to Malton and Poplington. We can't all be expected to join an increasingly long and slow traffic queue along Strensthal Road to get to York. No doubt more of a challenge when there are 4 lanes of traffic to cross. On the subject of access, we've long needed a safe cycle path from Strensthal through Ayswick. We have several hundred school pupils who attend Huntington Secondary. Most don't cycle because it's
draw
not
your
safe.
comments to a close, please.
Now was the time to have this included as part of an integral strategy. Looking at the ring road dualling overall, I have serious reservations about the number of traffic light control locations and the effect this will have. There'll be more stop-starting of traffic. Developing CYC policies, including closing access roads throughout the city, pushing more traffic onto the ring road, will mean potential dualling gains are severely compromised or worse, with more congestion misery for residents. Nowhere in the report is there any mention of actual savings in journey times, with just a solitary mention in paragraph 50 of a small decrease in carbon emission. No details have been provided regarding the results from the noise or air quality.
You will know better than most the time limits.
Thank you, Chair. I would just ask you to think clearly, very carefully about some of the concerns that a number of speakers have put forward to you tonight.
Thank you very much.
These must be considered before it goes to planning, otherwise you'll have too much opposition.
Thank you very much. Your comments will be taken into account when we consider the relevant agenda items later today. Could I just take the opportunity to thank all 9 of our public speakers and for their comments today. We'll now move on to agenda item 5, which is the forward plan. That's included between pages 15 and 18. And again, I'll just give a couple of seconds for colleagues to indicate if they're happy for us to accept that forward plan. I can see a consensus of nods. So we'll accept that and then move on to agenda item 6. Which is the preparations for welfare winter planning and support, which starts at page 19. And I'm going to hand over to Pauline to introduce the paper to us.
Thank you, Chair. This report reviews the provision of nationally and locally funded COVID welfare support available to financially vulnerable residents and families during the coming winter months, while the effects of the pandemic are still being felt across the city, and particularly now with the ending of furlough and a number of financial support schemes today, including the universal credit uplift. Can I just bring to members' attention that the government have announced a new grant scheme today called the Household Support Fund to be administered by councils. We're awaiting the details of that and the amounts, and we'll bring forward how that money will be distributed and recommendations around that. The report also assesses the costs and options around addressing school holiday hunger in the short term, while looking to address food poverty impacts in the city in the long term, with a recommendation to fund holiday food vouchers until February half term and allow time for a review to take place of this method of support and other support available at community level and any gaps and groups at risk. I'd like to respond to Councillor Webb's comments and acknowledge the points around coverage of the holiday activity food scheme and make the point also that the free school meal vouchers only cover school-aged children, not babies or preschool children. So that in itself doesn't cover all of the children that are in poverty. However, we still have some funding from public health to support the temporary continuation of the existing local COVID support fund for food and fuel over the winter period. And we will ensure that we advertise this scheme. And we also have the York Financial Assistance Scheme, when we've got 150,000 left in that fund, which again supports family with emergency assistance. We will also review the new government grant to see how that funding can support families over the Christmas period as well. And just to remind members, the cost of the free school meal vouchers is £50,000 per week if you're considering any further support of that nature over the Christmas period. The report also provides options for executive consideration around how to use some of the remaining related emergency COVID-related funding to best effect for the benefit of those residents most impacted by the pandemic, including early preventative schemes. There are 3 schemes detailed in the report for approval at paragraphs 34 to 39 in the report. Importantly, the report summarises the different elements of support that will be made available through specific themed activities, partnership coordination of advice and information, and a comprehensive communications plan. These combined activities, along with any approved funded schemes, will ensure residents can secure the right support at the right time over the coming winter period. Members are asked to approve all the recommendations in the report to support residents at this critical time and over the winter months. And I'm happy to answer any questions in relation to the report.
Thank you very much, Pauline. So I open the report for comments and questions. Councillor Craghill.
Thank you, Chair. I really do welcome this paper, which I think demonstrates the support that the Council, both directly and working very closely with a wide range of partners, has been able to provide for the least well off in our city and will continue to provide through the coming winter. This isn't to suggest for one moment that we can support everyone or meet everyone's needs in the face of the perfect storm that is coming our way, the end of furlough, the disgraceful removal by the government of the additional £20 a week on universal credit, continuing COVID pressures, the upheaval in the employment market, increasing debt and rising fuel prices. This situation really calls for the government to step up in a really big way, and they are still failing to do so despite the relatively small amount of additional funding which you just mentioned, Pauline. This is almost certainly going to turn out to be too little and too late. I would like to just also mention the comments from Councillor Webb. I would entirely challenge his interpretation of what's in this paper, or almost entirely anyway, in terms of what the Council is actually doing. I think the paper shows that we are stepping up as much as we possibly can, working with other statutory agencies, with the voluntary and community sector and grassroots food and support initiatives with very good partnership working. We are not simply relying on the government's activities funding by any stretch of the imagination. We have invested £1 million extra in hardship funds. We also support voluntary sector community groups through £100,000 of financial inclusion funding. We have the additional money in the 3 schemes in this paper, which I think will be really, really helpful. We are investing £150,000 in free school meals support for those coming holidays. Councillor Webb has referred to the holiday activities, and you've explained some of that. This is the specific point about the fact that some children will get this funding because they attend the activities, and other children may have difficulty in doing so because they don't. It's something that I did raise at the financial inclusion group some time ago, and as you said, we have a number of funding streams where we will try to make up for that disparity that is part of the government scheme. So again, I think we are doing everything we can on that. And we are going as far as we possibly can to support free school meals through the holidays. We can't do that forever because of our budget situation. So I also really welcome the proposal in the paper to take some of this discussion to scrutiny, to discuss cross-party how we can make best use of the resources that we do have available. And again, as I said, I think the recommendation to fund these 3 additional support schemes that are going to deliver benefits that go way beyond the sums of money that are being invested in order to help families to keep their finances on an even keel. So I do welcome very much what's in this paper, whilst recognising that we are facing a very difficult situation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cuthbertson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo Councillor Craghill's welcome for this report. Thank you, Pauline. As we consider this, we need to note that as a council, we're once again having to step in to ensure that no child goes hungry by ensuring that all eligible children will have access to free school meals over the school holidays until next year. The £150,000 investment which is proposed will benefit families who are struggling, and most particularly where other lifelines, such as the universal credit uplift, are being cut by the government. It continues to fall to councils like York to step in where the government continues to fall well short. It should not be down to individual councils to make up for this government's failings, effectively adding to the postcode lottery over whether children go hungry or not. It's important to note in this context the increase in the number of eligible pupils, which has gone from 2,721 in January of last year to 3,347 in January of this year. In the context of the coronavirus pandemic, we have a new focus on the issue of child hunger, yet this is by no means a new problem. The absence of any longer-term support equivalent to free school meals in the holidays is a long overlooked, if not ignored, problem. And it needs the government to step in and deliver on this as part of a longer-term strategy to combat child poverty. I'm glad to see the longer-term approach to funding this support package is proposed to be referred to the Children, Education and Communities Policy and Scrutiny Committee. I hope for a positive reception from opposition groups. The pandemic has exposed the financial vulnerability that too many families experience at this time. These significant challenges have had to be met with an unprecedented response. And while the impact of COVID-19 continues to be felt, I'm sure that the additional support available to families and children who need it most will be welcomed. I need hardly say that we will continue to campaign for longer-term solutions which acknowledge the struggles facing York's families and call for a nationwide strategy to address child poverty. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cuthbertson. Councillor Kilbane.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, Pauline. Just in reference to Councillor Craghill's comments, very pleased to hear that you're looking for ways to fill the gap for those kids who either are preschool or who are unable to go on school activities in order to qualify for free school meal vouchers. The problem is that they're just words, and actually that work should have been done by the time this report hit this table, because right now what you're looking at is winter is coming and you're making our kids play Hunger Games for food, and that cannot be acceptable to anybody. And I hear what you're saying, Councillor Cuthbertson, about poverty and the need to tackle the root causes of poverty. Well, we were supposed to have a Poverty Truth Commission in the council, and it was supposed to be set up in 2019, but there is no sign of it. Once again, words and no action. We're also supposed to be having poverty scrutiny across all aspects of poverty, but that has run into the sand due to lack of scrutiny officers and democracy officers to be able to take that forward. We talk about getting to the root causes and early intervention time and time again. We've told the council that we need to invest heavily in advisors who can make sure that everyone in this city is getting all of the benefits that they are entitled to. Now, that's a very direct way of bringing down government money into the pockets of people in this city to spend it. And you've not done that in any way, shape or form that's noticeable You've left it to ward committees to pick up. There is no programme in this city of ensuring that everybody is receiving the benefits that they're entitled to. None whatsoever. None that's coherent, none that's joined up, none that works well with all of the partners. So, while we welcome what little we've been able to secure, it doesn't go far enough. I think we have an administration that likes to talk the talk, but isn't walking the walk.
Thank you very much. Pleased that you welcome, in a sense, what has been secured, and I hope, like colleagues have said, that we can have that conversation about making sure that goes as far as possible, and where we do agree on this, making that case nationally. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite strange because Councillor Kilbane has said most of the things that I was going to say, but in the wrong way. I think slogans are very easy, action is very difficult, and from Councillor Kilbane and Councillor Webb, we've heard a lot of slogans that I'm sure will sound very good in Labour press releases. However, not a single solution, not a single budget amendment, not a single suggestion to actually deal with the issue. I think I suggest that Councillor Kilbane should probably go away and look at the work of the Financial Assistance Group, the Financial Improvement Fund. I'm expecting you to. I agree to read papers.
I'll have to stop.
Well, tell you what, when you stop your councillors interrupting me, you can stop me interrupting them.
What I was going to say, if you give me a chance, was I'll have to stop Councillor Eyre and Councillor Kilbane having a conversation, because I suspect it won't get picked up on the webcast. So if both councillors could resist that temptation, please.
What this administration has done, Chair, is to actually step in and put forward concrete plans, concrete action, and put money in, as Councillor Craghill said, £1 million last year to step in. We have continued to fund Citizens Advice and various different organisations to help work with those individuals who are in receipt of benefits, to make sure that we uptake benefits. We continue to fund the Welfare Benefits Unit. Perhaps other councillors may not have heard of that. There is significant amount of work that's going on doing that one. But the issue is, money is tight, and this is not something that councils can deal with alone. I think it was flagged by the Deputy Leader of the Labour Group yesterday, the £5 million of the pressures that children's services are facing. We are operating in a very difficult financial climate, and we are maximising the very much we can, and we will continue to find as much money as we can to support those most vulnerable and to support schemes to help those people. And that is why this paper was brought in the ethos of collegiate working and asking for help and asking for support. And I very much look forward to those opposition members coming to the scrutiny committee, as we refer that to, and coming forward with ideas about how to help and not just empty slogans for leaflets.
Thank you very much. So we have the recommendations at paragraph 4 that start on page 19 and go over to page 20. If I could please see visible support from colleagues for those that are in favour of accepting those recommendations. So thank you very much. That's a clear majority in favour of accepting those recommendations. Thank you, Pauline. We'll now move on to consider agenda item 7, which is the York and North Yorkshire Road Safety Partnership Safer Road Strategy. And this starts from page 47 in our paperwork pack. We have Neil at the table, and also James and Tony have just joined us. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper presents a new road safety strategy across North Yorkshire. The report details how York has influenced the new strategy to reflect the issues and concerns relevant here in York. And I'll let Tony, who led on this negotiation and process, take you through the report.
Thank you, Chair. The York and North Yorkshire Road Safety Partnership, which was formerly the 95 Allied Live Road Safety Partnership, is a long-standing grouping of the agencies and authorities, including the Police, Fire and Rescue Service, the Office of the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, and North Yorkshire County Council, who are committed to working together, sharing resources and expertise to provide a coordinated, evidence-led approach to prevent deaths and injuries on our roads. Road safety has a much wider impact than just preventing injuries. Improving road safety and the confidence of road users, including pedestrians, also helps to increase the levels of active travel, a key transport objective for the city. The proposed strategy sets out the overarching principles to progress interventions driven by the 4 E's of education, engagement, engineering, and enforcement. This report recommends that the updated road safety strategy is endorsed and used as a framework for the delivery of road safety interventions in the city in the future. It should be noted that the report in the annex is a draft text version which will be refreshed for publication following endorsement of the text by all of the partners. Subject to approval, it is planned to launch the strategy in the autumn.
Thank you very much. Open that for any comments and questions. First to Councillor de Grauw.
Thank you. As has just been said, this is an important successor to the 95 Live strategy of the York and North Yorkshire Road Safety Partnership, which involves all emergency services in the county and targets action to cut road casualties. As with many complex issues, there's no one magic bullet, but I've particularly welcomed the additional items that I specifically asked to be included, such as a referencing the action plan to awareness campaigns highlighting the need for drivers to pass wide of cyclists, which is a common issue of recent concern. The addition also of e-scooters and e-bikes to the category of vulnerable road users to reflect the changing nature of vulnerable road users in the area. There's also now an annual process of reviewing and refreshing the action plan each year, and reference to speed limit enforcement, including in 20-mile-an-hour areas where appropriate, with a specific outcome identified of traffic speed reduction within 20-mile-an-hour areas. I'm sure residents of York will be pleased to know that there's now real recognition of the needs to tackle speeding issues in urban as well as rural settings, and to work together with partners to promote a changed culture post-pandemic where people feel safe to walk or cycle in their own neighbourhoods rather than feeling cut off from local facilities, schools, neighbours, etc. by fast-moving traffic. So, Chair, I'm happy to recommend approval and thank the officers in particular for their work on this new 5-year strategy for York and North Yorkshire.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gorn, for those comments. Councillor Smalley.
Thank you very much, Chair, and may I just take the opportunity to thank officers who, for this paper and those that have been working on and delivering the road safety schemes. Just to point to paragraph 14, many thanks for the long-awaited amendments to the mini roundabouts along Green Lane. And whilst it's not worth amending, Green Lane is in Clifton Without rather than Rawcliffe Parish. Nonetheless, this scheme made a real difference locally and has ensured that the roundabouts, both with the Green Lane Trading Estate and also Beaver Dyke Estate, are far safer for cyclists, motorists and pedestrians. I'd also then just quickly like to turn everyone's attention to paragraph 18 and to thank the road safety team for delivering these important activities. I saw firsthand the impact the team had by giving training to the asylum seekers staying in York at the initial accommodation site, and the massive impact that had on the mental health of those staying at that facility, and obviously the active travel benefits for those individuals, meaning that they could get out and about and further enjoy their time in York. So just to thank officers involved in those schemes in particular. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kilbane.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Tony. Can I ask where this sits with LTP4?
It's a strategy that forms the overarching approach that we use with our partners to ensure that different agencies have sort of different responsibilities for road safety across the board, and it's to pull those together to ensure we get the best out of those different responsibilities. Within LTP4 and the previous local transport plan, this will be an item which we put in that overarching document. The specific elements that the council is responsible for, such as the highway layouts, come through that process. So the capital programme is used to deliver the changes to the highway network, which is, as I say, this is an overarching policy or strategy document.
So the funding for it, if you like, it comes through the LTP capital programme.
That's right, the funding for the highway changes, but obviously other partners have funding for enforcement or other elements within the overall strategy. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And another question, Chair, if I may, if I can ask Councillor de Gorn, Just where this sits in terms of the 20-mile-per-hour zones, because I know that the Police and Crime Commissioner is getting very keen on speed limits at the moment. It's becoming a real debate as to what are we looking at in terms of 20-mile-per-hour zones in
Sorry,
York?
yes, I did make
Just before you answer, I didn't catch. You said where this sits and said something, and I didn't catch it.
So where this road safety programme sits in terms of our thinking on 20-mile-an-hour zones in York, are we going to extend them? Are we going to roll them back? It's become a very live issue, hasn't it, with the Police and Crime Commissioner at the moment?
So just to respond, as I did refer to in my statement, there's a specific reference, it's page 14 of the policy document, which is page 71 in your pack, if you like. One of the outcomes under item, I think it's safer roads, there's a reference there to traffic speed, an outcome which is being sought through the strategy is traffic speed reductions within 20-mile-an-hour areas. So obviously in terms of actions, that wouldn't just be the police, it would be about all the partners working together to achieve that reduction in speeds where that is an issue. But equally, as I said, in terms of there is also specific reference, because I asked for it, and obviously that officers have been discussing that about speed limit enforcement, making specific reference in 20-mile-an-hour areas where appropriate. And obviously, that would be subject to the police operational to decide where that applies. But I was keen to make sure that that was referenced in the policy document for the whole York and North Yorkshire. And obviously it would be police discretion as to how that is actually looked at in an operational sense, but working with partners, with the engineers, emergency services and so on.
But sorry, just the question really was...
Just to nudge, do make sure you do it through the chair,
sorry,
so
Chair,
I can direct it, but...
Okay, Chair, we good to go?
Absolutely.
Okay, just what the question was relating to really is whether or not you're looking to roll out 20-mile-per-hour zones to more parts of the city, or you're happy with the current level that we have, especially if they become more enforceable through this plan.
Sorry, that isn't something that's addressed through this policy. This is about the existing plan. That would be something which would be relevant to LTP4 in terms of the overall approach. Alongside the other aspects about promoting sustainable travel.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that comments and the answers as well. So we've got the recommendations in front of us on page 48. Again, if I could visibly see if colleagues are happy to accept those recommendations, please. Thank you. So that's a clear majority in favour of accepting those recommendations. Thank you, James and Tony, for that. So that then takes us on to agenda item 8, which is the York Outer Ring Road. It starts on page 89 and carries through to page 320. And again, we've got Neil, James, and we've been joined by Gary. So welcome, and over to you to introduce the paper, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to introduce you to Gary to go through the report, and then I'll summarise at the end in a slightly different order, if that's okay. So over to Gary, who's the project manager that's led on this.
Good evening, councillors. The main purpose of the report, which has been presented to you, is twofold. Firstly, to report back to you about the public engagement process and the main outcomes from that. Secondly, to consider the revisions that we're recommending, having taken into account the public engagement process, and to proceed to apply for planning approval with the revised scheme. Finally, there are a number of other current related issues which are associated with the design process and are covered in the report, and I'll return to those later. So the background to the report is that a consultation took place in late 2020, and there was a good response in which the majority of users of the Outer Ring Road thought the existing road was poor. From the over 3,500 replies, 79% of respondents supported the scheme proposals in the consulted scheme. 44% of respondents thought that the proposals would encourage active travel, The key negative trends were comments from pedestrians and cyclists citing poor facilities at a number of locations. Therefore, the recommendations in the report are asking you to note the general progress of the scheme and approve the outcome of the public engagement process, to accept the revisions which we're recommending under item 3 and shown in the general arrangement drawings in the annex, which would be taken forward to a planning application. Those can be summarised as the provision of pedestrian and cycle crossing facilities at the junction of Wigington Road and A1237, the provision of a safeguarded route for pedestrians and cyclists from Strensall Road to Monks Cross Drive and North Lane alongside the A1237, diversion of Bridleway number 4 at Huntington and provision of a Pegasus crossing at the junction of the A1237 North Lane and Monks Cross Drive, design and development changes to the scheme which include noise and environmental mitigation, and finally in that batch, realignment of a section of dualling between North Lane and Malton Road to preserve established mature trees and wildlife. The final recommendation in that paragraph is to give approval to submit a planning application based on those revisions and delegate to the Director of Transport, Environment and Planning to agree any minor amendments to the design. So going on, the report summarises the public engagement process and is supported by a separate detailed report on this at Annex A. On environmental issues, the report discusses the outcome of the noise assessment, landscaping and tree planting, and flood risk. Other technical issues raised are street lighting, speed limits, and carbon reduction. On carbon reduction, an assessment has been undertaken in accordance with the guidance. Early indications of the assessment are generally positive, but there is more work to do on that. Our funders, West Yorkshire Combined Authority, will be monitoring the progress of the design through their own assessment process, and there are opportunities to reduce emissions through a number of initiatives, such as promoting public transport, accelerating uptake of zero emissions technology, and I'll just make the example of the Hyperhubs project that is to be opened shortly, and minimising carbon emissions during construction. Just if I can just sum up, if you bear with me, please. So we've sifted through all the issues and comments and made recommendations which we think are reasonable, proportional and practical at this point in time. Not everybody will agree with what we've proposed, but we think they address the current issues. There are further measures we could recommend, such as more underpasses or bridges, but we believe we have struck the right balance and focused on priorities. I can now just respond to some of those comments that were made earlier, if I may. And quite a few of those were concentrated around the Wigington Road Junction and Wigington Road North. And so we've proposed a package of measures in these revisions which make some improvements and address some of the issues raised by the respondents, such as Tom Franklin, Ben Story, Mrs. Markey, Hugh Ferguson. And we consider it to be a safe layout because we've not got island hopping, we've got a series of controlled crossings which lead from Clifton Moor to Haxby Wigington and to the Clifton Gate Business Park. Does everybody understand the difference between controlled and uncontrolled, just in case? Yeah, okay. So the movements are estimated to be low. We carried out surveys in 2019, and having said that, yeah, we recognise that many people might use these facilities, and we want to encourage that. So it may the demand may increase in the future, but for now, we think this is the right solution. Tom Franklin talked about really sort of strategic climate emergency, net carbon zero. I have touched on that, and there is reference to that in the report, and that is a sort of a developing area of the scheme. Councillor Melly cited LTN 120. So I'd like to make the point, that when the scheme was born in 2016, if you like, although I mean, the ideas go back many years, the the strategic outline business case, yeah, that was 5 years before LTN 120 came along. So we have tried to address that, and we've got a big improvement with the segregated orbital pedestrian cycle route, and other crossings being introduced into that. And so we think we've gone a long way to addressing LTN 120. Mark Corrigan talked about Pegasus crossings. So we are providing a new Pegasus crossing at the Bridleway, which is in between North Lane and Malton Road. So I don't know if Mark hadn't picked that up. Obviously, he did refer to the other example at Wigington Road North. And whilst we haven't proposed one there, we have offered to work with Mrs. Markey on an uncontrolled equestrian crossing. Obviously, that's our sort of proposal at the moment. I think Andy Shrimpton's comments were fairly sort of strategic about the linking of this scheme into a wider sort of strategy, and I think that goes beyond the purposes of this report. Councillor Doughty referred to 2 Ayerswick residents that only got informed about the measures that affect them at a late notice. We have tried to address this. We did go and see them personally and explain. They were quite reasonable about it, but they are concerned about the land take off their front garden, which is only fairly small, and the proposed crossing at that point. And if I can just sort of talk about that, the proposed crossing in Ayerswick was originally in a more northerly position, approximately 150 metres north of the ring road. So through the comments that we received and the desire to create this segregated pedestrian cycle route as an orbital route, it only seemed appropriate that crossing would be on that route, because that would be the desire line. There's a lot of disquiet about that in Ayerswick Parish Council and other members, and what I can say is that both those locations are suitable. There's no, as a project team, we can go for either. We recommended what we thought was the best location, but there is some flexibility there. I would just like to finish off with about no mention about journey times that Councillor Doughty raised. This is contained in many earlier reports. It's not the purpose of this report, but the general sort of saving in journey times on the length from Wetherby Road to Malton Road. Depends which link you're on and which side road, but there are overall savings of approximately 10%, 15 to 20% in journey times. I think that completes my...
Okay, thank you. I'll just quickly try and sum up. So the council has successfully bid to the West Yorkshire Combined Authority and Department for Transport to the Major Road Network Fund and secured £71.5 million for this first phase of dualling. 90% of that funding is external. To respond to the speakers, you could choose to hand back the 63.6 million of external funding, but it's been awarded to this project, as Gary alluded to, on a strong business case that showed benefits to congestion. We wouldn't have got the money without that business case. Previous executives have recognised the need to capture the benefit across the city of dualling the ring road. Indeed, full council appointed councillors from across the political spectrum to a working group for the next local transport plan, which exec have agreed to develop and to resource by allocating funding. But as a local authority, we cannot arbitrarily spend that 63.6 million funding on something else. We would just have to hand it back. Executive have already approved the principle of this project and approved the acceptance of the funding and asked officers to develop and consult on proposal. As you've heard, the report updates in some detail the significant public engagement on the detailed design. Overwhelming support was received for the project, with 79% of the responses supporting the project. The report updates executive on the outcome of that consultation. Comments were also received seeking to improve the active travel elements of the project. The report proposes improvements to active travel as per Annex B and detailed by Gary. And I would draw executive members' attention to para 35 of the report that shows for cycling as a mode of transport, the current road layout scores 48% compliance with the aspirational standard for active travel that the government have developed called LTM 120. The designs which we consulted upon with the public last year raised this score to 70%. The additional measures detailed in Annex B in response to the public consultation further raised this to 80% compliance with this aspirational standard for active travel. The decision of whether to make these changes is one of political choice. As is detailed in the financial implications section, these improvements will need to be funded from the contingency in the project. We have consulted parish councils and ward councillors on the proposals in Annex B, and meetings have been held on an ongoing basis. As Gary alluded to, the latest after this report was finalised. We are aware through this consultation on Annex B that some concerns have been raised, particularly about the crossing at Strensall Road. Whilst the report details the designs we would like to submit to planning and seeks a design freeze, these will go through a detailed design phase, and there is a delegation at recommendation 4, which allows me to approve changes, and I am reassured that the team have discussed an alternative location for the Strensall Road crossing, which addresses the concerns raised. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I now open this item for any comments or questions. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. That was quite a comprehensive introduction. I'm sort of crossing off things I was going to say as I was going through. So I think I'll just start by welcoming progress. I think this has taken us longer to get here than we probably would have wanted. I think the original scheme obviously being around junction improvements and dualling being separate, but bringing those two together has made the whole project take a little bit longer than we would have liked. But it's great to see the progress, and it's something that people really are interested in. It was interesting listening to Councillor Doughty at the beginning when I first bought my house and I started on home improvements, and I was a Yorkshireman, as I always have been. My father would always give me the phrase, don't spoil it for a ha'porth of tar, meaning don't cut corners here and there because it will cost you a lot of money in the long run if you don't get it right first time. That is the case of the A1237. The then North Yorkshire Council decided they would save the ha'porth of tar, save their £1 million and not dual it and leave it as a single road. And now that very same Conservatives are now having to find £63.5 million to undo the mistake they first made. So one always listens to the lectures of Councillor Doughty, I think. I welcome the work that officers have done in terms of this consultation. This is not an easy thing to consult on in the first place, and it certainly wasn't an easy period of time to undertake that consultation as we went through the global pandemic and the issues of COVID. And it really has been a huge ask and a huge task, and I really welcome the work that the officers have done. Over 17,000 packs are being sent out to residents across the city, do that sort of old-fashioned touch that we used to do, not the online, but actually delivering hard copies to people. And I think while 15% return rate isn't always seen as that fantastic, those of us that do deliver surveys know 15% is actually quite a good response rate in terms of things like this. And not only that, marrying that with online, so we have actually got over 3,500 responses, and that really is a really fantastic effort, and 79% support for the scheme overall. And I think I was interested, Councillor Melly said less than half of the people thought it was an improvement. Well, the glass is half full. If less than half thought it was an improvement, didn't think it was an improvement, more than half did think that the schemes were an improvement. So it depends how you look at things. In terms of responding to that consultation, we were never going to get everything right for everybody. Everybody will have different ideas about how the scheme should be, and it's not possible to really please everybody. And I think all of us, myself included, if I had a blank check, could come up with fantastic ideas about how we can improve that. But as I said, one of the other speakers said, it's not good enough to say money has run out. We were working within a strict financial envelope, and if you exceed that financial envelope, you can't progress with the scheme. And the compromises that we've made on this particular paper represent upward of £1 million of additional cost to the scheme, and that represents the extent that we've gone to make sure that we have tried to secure those improvements. And those were primarily around active travel. We're often accused of not listening. Here you can see in black and white, we have listened, we've acted as much as we possibly can. Within the financial envelope, we've sought to make those improvements that we were able to. And as James alluded to, paragraph 35, the CLOS, something I've learned now, the cycling level of service, improved from 48% to 80%, and that really is a fantastic achievement. And I think the last bit I would allude to is sort of that level of external investment. Again, James stole my thunder in terms of that one. That is 90% external funding. That is only £8 million of CYC funding. It really has been a huge effort to get this scheme progressed, to get the scheme moving, and that's funding that is at risk if we don't progress. That said, we have listened again to the public speakers and to those who have contacted us, and I do understand that there are still some concerns, particularly regarding the location of the Strensall Road crossing. I still support the recommendations, but as per the comment Chambers made, recommendation 4 does still allow for tweaks to the design to be picked up, addressing some of those concerns. And I would ask that it be recorded in the minutes that we will do that. Again, focusing on the positive, I think this is a scheme that will reduce congestion and journey times. It will move traffic from the city centre. It will improve air quality. And it's something that residents and businesses on the whole do massively support. And I think the last thing that probably hasn't been alluded to is the local plan and the scale of growth in the city. And it's not just about how the existing levels of traffic will move around our city. We're talking about building upward of 20,000 homes over the next 20 years. And without the infrastructure to support that, we wouldn't be able to deliver that. So with that, Chair, happy to approve the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Councillor de Gaulle.
Thank you, Chair. As one of 2 Greens in the administration, we are very pleased that following the responses to the consultation, we've secured significant improvements that have been referred to a value of £850,000 for walking and cycling provision along, across and around the Ring Road. In particular, signal control crossing points to reach Clifton Gate Business Park and across Wigington Road to help create a safe separated cycle route, joining up existing routes from Haxby Road, from York Road in Haxby right through to Clifton Moor. I do, of course, also note the comments and concerns that the public speakers have raised, and certainly support further work from the officers to reflect on those before the planning application is considered by a planning committee. I do understand that many residents in the consultation have said that they believe dualling the Ring Road is the only way to tackle growing congestion, and respect those views born out of frustration. However, as some of the speakers have referred to, we do also know there's extensive evidence that is recognised since 1994 report known as SACTRA on the induced demand that building more road space creates induced traffic after a very short time, and that can be anything between 10 and 20%. More recently, officers reported that the relatively recently completed Poppleton A59 Ring Road junction with the widening of the roundabout there did reduce delay, but increased traffic using it by 30% within a short period of time. For these reasons, York Green Party has always been arguing against expansion of the Ring Road and has been the only political party to do so in the city. Given the current climate crisis, I'd be interested to hear whether this is still the case from the other parties. In a council trying to face up to post-pandemic financial challenges as well as climate emergency, the party that I represent feels that this isn't the time to be spending the sums of money which we just heard and committing further huge amounts of embodied energy and carbon emissions to dualling a stretch of road. In 2019, as our speakers have also referred to, a Green Party motion led to cross-party endorsement for a declaration of a climate emergency and a target for the city to reach zero carbon by 2030. The UN International Panel Climate Change reported in August this year the final warning in terms of need for real decisive action at COP26 summit in Glasgow in November, a code red for humanity. Over 80% of respondents in a recent council survey agreed that York should be aiming to achieve zero carbon by 2030. And to achieve this, we now have to seriously reduce traffic levels in the city, as transport accounts for 1/3 of our locally generated emissions. So if the Ring Road does progress, it will be crucial to minimise traffic growth around the potential benefits of the extra capacity are locked in through bold LTP4 measures, making sustainable travel the natural choice for most people travelling inside the Ring Road and achieving modal shift to bus, bike, scooter or walking. We've already made a start on this, as was referred to last week, with £3.3 million package of active travel measures planned across the city, approved at my decision session last week. One of these schemes, in actual fact, is a desperately needed short-term measure on the Outer Ring Road, but beyond the scope of this particular phase, to enhance safety for cyclists wanting to get to Manor School from Rawcliffe or from Poppleton to Clifton Moor, addressing the lack of planning that was referred to by my colleague when the scheme was originally built some 30 years ago. So there is no one right pathway to zero carbon. None of us have ever done this before, but we are committed to working in every way we can to make progress to achieve carbon reduction and more sustainable ways of living. But in the context of the IPCC report, it's the final warning that there's a code red for humanity. We cannot vote to support this dualling proposal in a climate emergency, and will abstain when we come to the vote.
Thank you very much. Just checking if Councillor Kilbane wants to come in on this item. Do you want to go now, so I don't go to the recommendations? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I've only got two very short remarks. And this is, I'm speaking for all three councillors for Huntington and New Earswick about the Tunstall Road roundabout, which of course is in our ward. Lots of people think it isn't, but it is. We warmly welcome the changes to that roundabout, which we have been campaigning for a very long time. What we want to see is a safe cycle route to school, down to Huntington School, so that some of the children who are old enough and astute enough to come down that cycle path, should it be established safely, down to the school, can do so. And we're very pleased to see that. I'm also pleased to hear Gary say that the crossing will be reconsidered, because the three of us also had concerns about the location of that crossing, which is just outside our ward by a very small amount. And I'm pleased to hear, Gary, that you will reconsider that, because I think that's really very important. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Runciman. I think you'll have to come in now, Councillor Kilbane, or you'll lose your chance.
Yeah, I'm good to go as ever. Just a question first, really. Great report, Gary. Huge project, probably the biggest of your career. I mean, it's an enormous thing to be doing. Done bigger?
Yeah, 10 years ago.
All right, okay. Oh, you're on that one. Okay, just is there any reason why it can't be LTN 120 compliant, the cycling infrastructure?
No, there's no reason if you want to invest in it. It's just a case of we're applying the standards for that within the envelope that we've got. There could be sort of more land take. There could be more facilities. Could be more underpasses. So yeah, it could be.
James, you wanted to come in?
I think just to come in to add to Gary's response, Gary's absolutely right that it's a funding constraint. So we've spoken to both DFT and to WICA about whether they will fund additional measures to get us to complete LTM 120 compliance, and they've said no. LTM 120 note is also very clear that funding is a recognised constraint about why it can't be achieved, and that's why we do the assessments we do to see the effectiveness even of the funding we are spending.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kilbane.
Okay, thanks, and thanks, Chair. I mean, I think in terms of the overall design, you clearly going to have to go back and have a look at some of the ideas given the representations tonight. Surely putting traffic lights on a dual ring road doesn't really make that much sense. And we've got traffic lights at Wiggy Road, and I've got to say, traffic lights were taken off dual roads previously because of the problems that they caused. I'm thinking of the Cotmanthorpe Junction in particular. So, that needs to be looked at again. I think we do need to go away, or you do need to go away and take on board the concerns of all the businesses around Wigington Road. It can't be acceptable to be running businesses with that level of noise there. I've taken my kids to Creepy Crawlies on the bus, and it is an absolute nightmare. And from what I'm hearing, this doesn't sound as though it's going to improve it much. We've got an underpass at the Clifton Moor roundabout, which is currently an underpass to nowhere. It just switches the lane to the north, I guess. Guess that's to do with land as well. Whereas, maybe that would be a better place to Haxby, and clearly the land grab up at Strensall needs to be looked at and negotiated. I should imagine if somebody came grabbing my garden, I don't care how small a bit of it is, I'd want to try and defend that. What I do want to talk about is the things that are to do with the strategic nature of this proposal, which I think you said, Gary, was beyond the purposes of this report, really, but it's not beyond the purposes of this council. you know, what this council should be doing, what this administration should be doing, is looking as to how this all fits together with transport in the city. But we're doing that against a background of a local transport plan 4, which is being kicked into the long grass, as far as I can see, and a local plan which is crumbling due to lack of resource. So that doesn't fill us with a great deal of confidence. I'm sure that this development, which the Labour group do not oppose, having voted for previously, I think, although I wasn't active in it at the time, we don't oppose the development, but what we are greatly concerned about is the lack of joined up thinking that's going on with it across the whole of the city. So, and I'm sure, you know, for the long-suffering users of this section of the Outer Ring Road, the dualling will come as a great relief. And it will be very useful for some people to be able to cycle stretches of the Ring Road to get from one part of the Ring Road to another part of the Ring Road. But that's where it stops. It's not joined up to anything else. It is, in many respects, a road to nowhere. When you come off on Wiggy Road or you come off on Haxby Road or whichever the roundabouts you come off on, you've got no cycling infrastructure there to carry you on into town. And as far as I can see, there is no sufficient cycling infrastructure that would allow you to use a bike to transport you and your family and your kids safely and without worry into the city. And surely what we need to be doing now is joining these things up. If we are promoting active travel, so walking and cycling, then we need to be making sure that we provide the infrastructure for people to do that. What this proposal is to move the footpaths so that the walkers, the person that's supposed to be at the top of the priority chain, have to walk the long way round if they want to access the villages that they're going to, if they wanted to stroll into town. And the relief that this ring road will provide is short term. You know, we are planning to put, from a base in 2016 to 2036, we are planning to put an extra 15,000 cars onto the ring road during peak times. So that 1 hour of peak time, an extra 15,000 cars. Well, even if the dual ring road can sustain that, and I think the sort of the time savings that you're going to be getting are in a matter of minutes. Now, even if the ring road can sustain that, where are all these cars going to go? We're going to end up with congestion in places worse than we currently see it. It just displaces the congestion to somewhere else. We really need to take a good look at what we're doing here and think about what it is that we're trying to achieve. And the only way that we can support this programme is if we do have that locked-in carbon reduction and that locked-in reduction in car use, because it's not just about carbon, it's about space, it's also about congestion. And I hear what we're saying to do with this report, that is in an area of development. Well, actually, this council shouldn't be taking these actions until they've got those plans sorted out and know what they're doing with them in terms of using this investment. And we welcome the investment. Nobody in the right mind is going to turn away £60 million worth of government investment in the local economy, or West Yorkshire investment in the local economy. But what we need to be doing is using this investment to make sure we reduce car use in the city. And as far as this is concerned, there's just absolutely no plans for that whatsoever. So I would endorse what we heard from one of our speakers tonight, which was that if we are going to go ahead with this, then we should be looking at only doing so if we are going to look at Ghent-style transport plans for the city of York. At the moment, we're not doing anything of that like. We're just building roads, and we're not even thinking about what the consequences will be for the cars that use those roads when they come off that road. And as I say, probably in 10 years' time or so, we're going to be facing the same congestion problems here. So while we welcome this, what the new Labour administration will do when we come into office is make sure that this ring road is used in order to reduce congestion and carbon in York through some vision, through some far-sighted plans, by joining things up and thinking things through instead of just this sort of short-term approach, this short-term managerial approach that we get from the Lib Dems and the Greens. And just finally on that, it's just simply not good enough for the executive member for transport to abstain on the biggest project that he's brought before this council. You own this dualling of the ring road. It's your department and it's your administration. And I'm afraid that the whole of the York public will see the executive member for transport not voting for one of his own projects as just yet more evidence of the coalition of chaos that this administration has become.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kilbane. I'm pleased within that those listening will have picked up your welcome of the investment and the fact that you're not opposed to dualling. I wonder, James and Gary, earlier there were some comments about amendments, LTP4, local plan, whether you wanted to make any response.
I think the point I would make is that this report is specific to this project. As Councillor de Gorn alluded to, just last week we had a raft of active travel measures that were citywide. As I alluded to when I spoke, the local transport plan is a project that is live and is a project that is real. The next item on the agenda, indeed, is another example of how we are taking not just a car-dominated, but actually a different approach to how transport in the city works. And indeed, you could argue that Haxby Station will be the first mass transit system in York for a very long time. So I think it's seeing transport is in this report is a very narrow element about this specific project, but it's obviously a much wider agenda which is being addressed through the local transport plan.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smalley.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just, not wanting to question you, just wanted to make sure that what I heard was what you actually said in terms of for the record. Did I hear that you would prefer the underpass that's proposed at the Clifton Moor roundabout to move to the Haxby Road roundabout?
I'm sure whatever I say, Councillor Smalley, you will hear whatever you want to hear. But I think it's definitely something that could be looked at. And if you look at the underpass on the Clifton Moor roundabout, I'm assuming it's there partly to move the cycle path to the north side of the road, but also because that land is designated for housing, isn't it, in the local plan. So I would hope that actually, rather than using this money to build that underpass there, we should be looking for the developers to be contributing money towards that.
And then not to you, could I just check with officers, because the drawings I have in my papers show that the Haxby Road roundabout has 3 underpasses. Would adding a 4th underpass to that roundabout make any difference?
Yeah, I think you're mistaken. Haxby Road has, I think it's 4 underpasses. Yeah, and I think Councillor Kilbane just might have made a slip there, but it's worth confirming that the underpass at Clifton Moor is through working with the developers in the past 2 years. That's why that is there, because they've already committed to that, and it's gone through this meeting previously to that. We will continue to work with the developers, and that they will put that funding in.
Thank you.
So if I can just make a correction, Chair. Sorry, yeah, you're quite right, Councillor Smalley.
Councillor Kilbane.
Thank you for pointing that out.
You have to stop talking when I'm talking, or we won't get very far. I'll bring you back in a second. I just had Councillor Crackhill indicate first. Councillor Crackhill.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make 2 brief comments, really. Firstly, I thought to welcome the fact that that Labour has clarified that they do not oppose the building of the ring road, but then I did get rather confused since Councillor Kilbane made quite a strong argument for why they might oppose it, because he explained how it will generate more traffic in over quite a short period of time. So I'm still a little bit confused about Labour's position in that respect. But secondly, I suppose I would like to welcome the fact that he said that we do need a very strategic approach that takes in our approach to transport around the city, and that is certainly what we are working on and working on through LTP4. And I do hope that Labour is planning to engage constructively in that process as we develop LTP4, because I would agree that if it does go ahead, if this particular stretch of dualling does go ahead, then we absolutely do need to lock in the benefits. And I think we agree on that. And I think people would like to see us all actually working together on that. And that is what we're doing.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kilbane.
First of all, to Councillor Smalley, yes, you're quite right. Sorry, I meant the Wigginton Road roundabout, not the Haxby Road roundabout. So the one where the traffic lights are going to be on the dual carriageway. That's where I meant. You're right to point that out. Sorry, it's just when I was glancing at my notes, the wrong one came up. In terms of working together to achieve the reduction that we all need to see in carbon and car use, etc. I would happily do that, but the impression that I get is that actually LTP4, it looks as though it's trying to be stalled so that there's nothing is produced until after the next local elections. That's certainly what appears to be happening here. The local plan is being under-resourced, so that looks as though it's going to stall as well. There's no shame in it, Councillor Eyre. It's what you do, and it's clear for all to see. It's not about the individual workers, Councillor Eyre. If you do want to start having a conversation with me again, it's actually about just having the officers in place who can resource it. And actually, Councillor Craghill, to answer your question, the Lib Dems in this administration are stringing you along. They've been stringing you along from the start. You're not going to achieve any of the things that you want to achieve. They're just using you to maintain their power.
Thank you very much. So again, in and amongst that, you made a point about the local plan and LTP4, which I know James has partially addressed, but again, if I go to Neil.
Yeah, so in terms of the local plan process, that's in the control of the planning inspectorate at this point in time, and we are meeting the planning inspector's requirements in terms of providing them with information. And indeed, we are now waiting their return to us as to what next steps they wish to take. So it isn't stalled. We're providing the information in a timely manner to the inspectorate as requested. In terms of the overall capacity of the network of the whole city, that will be impacted by the local plan. We've going, as Councillor Eyre said, we will be looking to accommodate 20,000 new properties over the period of the plan. That's 40,000 plus people who want to get about. They'll have jobs, they'll want to live their lives in York, and they'll need to get about. The Outer Ring Road is a real opportunity to effectively facilitate a more free-running system within the city itself, and the opportunity to provide more sustainable transport options on our limited highway network. So I think that's a really important point. LTP4 is in development, as James has said. We're expecting to report back to the executive in the first quarter of next year, as we actually outlined in the May report to this executive. And in respect of the detail that follows thereafter and how it interacts with the Outer Ring Road won't actually be in construction until 2023. So in terms of the actual impact and that capacity being delivered into the highway network, there is time for this executive and indeed the council as a whole to make interventions in the city's highway infrastructure to make sure that when that road opens, it is captured early doors in terms of its delivery.
Thank you very much. James.
I can just hear my comms colleagues in the back of my head just reminding me that actually the consultation we've just taken on the local transport plan was purposely done in consultation with the engagement on the carbon reduction strategy, and the very principle of combining those big strategies that impact on the city was done at the same time for exactly that reason, to make sure that they address the fact that they cross over and impact on each other in the same way that the economic strategy does.
Thank you very much. We have the recommendations in front of us on pages 90 and 91. Also note the request at the start of this item from Councillor Eyre to make sure that we specifically minute regards paragraph 4 and those minor amendments which may be required, which I'm sure officers will pick up in the event that those recommendations are agreed. So if I could please see those in favour of the recommendations. And if I could see any abstentions, please. Thank you very much. So that's a clear majority in favour of accepting those recommendations with that new minute. Thank you very much, Gary and James. That then takes us on to agenda item 9, which is Haxby Station. This starts at page 321, and I'm handing over to Neil, James, Tony and Nick to introduce this paper, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the provision of a station in Haxby has been a long-held aspiration of the Council. As you're aware, the Council has been awarded funding by the Department for Transport to develop a further funding bid to actually build a new station at Haxby. So it's sort of seed funding to actually build the station. This report seeks approvals to add this development fund onto the budget and commission Network Rail to undertake the studies to develop the business case. It also seeks to purchase an area of land which is of value to the project, either as the station site or for an alternative site for allotments. I'll let Tony take you through the detail of the report.
Thank you. So this report provides an update to the Executive on progress made towards a proposed new rail station in Haxby. It seeks approval to add the Haxby Station project to the Council's capital programme in 2021-22 and continue with development work with our delivery partners, Network Rail. Additionally, approval is sought from members to acquire the freehold interest of a specific plot of land within the Haxby area, which would either significantly de-risk the future delivery of the project or be utilised for other strategic council objectives. The case for the station is strong, owing to the large population within walking and cycling distance of the potential locations. The £400,000 of funding for the development of the business case for a station has been awarded by the Department for Transport through the New Station Fund. The location of the land proposed to be purchased is strictly confidential. Subject to the decision on the purchase and following the completion of the acquisition, if approved, a further update of Haxby Station will be presented to the Executive at the next available meeting. Owing to the need to complete legal processes and the early date of the next Executive meeting in October, it is possible that the update will not be until the November meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and obviously open it for any questions or comments. I think before I open up the discussion to others, what I would say is that the development of a new rail station in Haxby has been an ambition of this administration from day one, and that is why I'm particularly pleased to welcome this report and note the progress that's being led by the Council. As outlined in paras 3 to 5, the Council has been working proactively to secure the much needed funding to take this project forward, and following our bid to the DfT, we've secured £400,000 to further develop our business case, and crucially the DfT have indicated their support for the project. Since that funding has been secured, work has taken place to identify suitable sites where a station could be located. Originally, Site 1 had been identified within a similar location to the old Haxby rail station. However, a second site, as has just been explained, has now been located as a potential alternative. I should say the details of that site have not been revealed today as they are commercially sensitive, but a further report, as we've just heard, will be presented to the Executive in October or November, providing more information. If we decided to purchase this second site, it would allow us to significantly de-risk the overall scheme for all of the reasons outlined in paragraph 10. And as mentioned in the report, this is an unexpected and time-limited opportunity, hence why the proposal has been brought this evening. There are many excellent reasons to proceed with this scheme. A new station would increase connectivity for communities, providing faster, more efficient, sustainable transport links, for example, from Haxby into York, Leeds, Manchester and beyond, as well as linking this area with Moulton and Scarborough. It's also worth noting that when the initial consultation was undertaken on Haxby Station, an overwhelming 91% backed our proposals to build a new station in Haxby. Therefore, we should do what we can to ensure that this is delivered to the benefit of residents, and therefore I'm very happy to support the purchase of the second site on this basis. Of course, there remains a lot of work to do, and we'll continue to do what we can to make this happen, with further updates due to be shared in the weeks after this executive meeting. But with that, very happy to note the report and suggest that we agree the recommendations. Neil.
Just for the public at home, Chair, I just want to clarify that the location, whilst confidential, is known to the executive in terms of whilst you're making this decision.
Thank you. Councillor de Gaulle.
Yes, I very much welcome this proactive progress on a long-held aspiration to widen choice of travel options in the area and reopening or establishing a station for the Haxby and Wigginton area, especially if a suitable alternative sites available that mean we can avoid having to move allotment holders off their carefully tended plots. I'm aware that there are plans to increase frequency of trains between Scarborough and York, and certainly would hope that this would become part of the offer, that if we were able to establish a station, a half-hourly service would be ideal, helping to reduce the need for residents to drive into the centre of York for onward journeys beyond the city. I'm happy to support the recommendations, take this project a step closer to opening the first new station in York for over a century. I've got my calculations right.
If you didn't, Neil would have shot his hand up, I'm sure, to clarify that. But I'm pleased. Just say that again, the first station in over a century. Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions? If not, we do have the recommendations in front of us that are on pages 321 and 322. If I could please see all. Councillor Kilbane, I did ask, but.
And I did put my hand up, Chair, but you were already in your papers by then. Does Councillor have a prejudicial interest in this?
No, I think it's a family commitment that he's had to go at this stage.
Okay, and at what point will you be able to tell the closed meeting who the vendor is?
Nick?
Yeah, at the moment it's obviously confidential, so once we've purchased the land, we will be able to advise.
Thank you. And we in the Labour Group obviously welcome this proposal. I think it's a really good proposal. Paying 3 times over the odds for the land is going to be a very expensive gamble if it ends up being allotments or woodland or something like that. However, if it turns out to be a train station, then it was a bargain. So it's something worth doing. I think it's a calculated risk that's definitely worth taking commercially. The only other question I've got is, why are the council buying the land rather than Network Rail?
The council the opportunity to buy land, I think, is the first thing I would say. And the way the mutation fund works is it's the councils who fund bids, and it is councils that need to find a contribution in match funding, and buying this land would be part of that contribution in match funding should it come off. So we're in a position to do it.
One supplementary to that, Chair. So if it does come off and we get it all up and running, at some point we'd sell it to Network Rail or the operators. So we'd own a train station.
In effect, we'd own the freehold. Tony, do you want to?
Yeah, just to clarify, the sort of detailed arrangements are subject to further work with Network Rail, exactly who owns which bit. That would form part of that. But in principle, the land can form a match funding element to the delivery of the project.
Thank you very much. Neil?
Just again for clarity, you're talking, and Tony put me right in terms of the figures. You're looking at a figure between 12 to 17 million pounds to develop the station, and that will be a contribution made predominantly by DfT. But as James has said, we'll be expected to make a local contribution. Our local contribution, in effect, we're putting up in advance here in terms of a land deal that will hopefully increase the chances of us being able to draw down that 12 to 17 million pounds and convince the DfT that we're ready to deliver that station on their behalf.
Thank you very much. So we have the recommendations in front of us. If I could please see all those in favour of accepting those recommendations. So that's a clear majority in favour of accepting those. Thank you very much. And that takes us to agenda item 10, urgent business. I haven't been advised of any urgent business, but I do want to mention just one thing. Amanda Hatton has been duly sitting through this executive meeting without any papers, but it is Amanda's last executive meeting here as corporate director. So I just wanted to minute our thanks to Amanda, wish her all the best of luck as she goes to Edinburgh. I'm sure you won't miss all of the lengthy meetings, although you'll just be going to other lengthy meetings. Amanda, anything you want to mention?
No, just I've really enjoyed working in York. The last couple of years have been fascinating given the pandemic, and I'm really very happy memories. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And if we could minute our thanks, please, that would be appreciated. And on that, we close the meeting. Thank you all.